Great to see you here again. My name is Luc de Koster, founder of the Koster Academy. And in this video, I will introduce what we call the theory of constraint. It's also one of the achievements of Goldratt when he started to look at operations, projects, and business to find out what is the constraint that's limiting the company, the organization, or the project team to be effective. Identifying the constraints is very important. Now, before we continue, don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. So let's have a look at the constraints. What are constraints? So what is a constraint? Well, when we look at constraints, it's basically anything that is stopping us from working efficiently. Now, we're looking at limiting performance and reducing efficiency. And we also refer what we call the weakest link. Another name of the constraints could be a bottleneck. A bottleneck when we find out on the highway because traffic is not going through. When we look at a production also or in a chain, the weakest link determines the strength of the chain. And that's what we want to find out. What is the weakest link? What are the bottlenecks? What are the things that are reducing our efficiency? Now, we can also look at cost and throughput constraints. Cost constraints are typically the constraints where we have limitations of our budget and we're looking at the budget as main driver, but we can also look at the constraints related to throughput. How many activities are we completing in a certain time? How much items are we producing? And the theory of constraint is very important, not only here, but also in operations and in any business environment. What is the reason why we are not producing better? And production can be a production of cars or whatever we are producing, or it can be the production, the output of completed activities in our project and finally our project. We also have to be able to identify the real issues. And that's one of the things people are doing things. They are looking at the elements like they have been doing it all the time. And when you're looking at the wrong constraints or you're just doing what you are doing, then there is a big problem and you will not find out what the real constraint is. I've seen a lot of examples like that when you look at these elements, and you can do a lot of savings just by looking at the constraints, finding out what is in fact creating or what is the reason of the constraints. In the book Critical Chain Project Management, Goldratt identifies some constraint in a company, a steel production company. And what they are looking at, they're measuring the production in tons per day, tons of steel they produced. And when they look at that, they're not really looking at the real issue. The issue is not how many tons of steel that you produced, finished products that you produce, but the real element is how much of the finished products you can get. What is your throughput? The idea here is looking at what is making our company to fail on the delivery of finished items. When we are working certain things, well, we have to see that we can sell them. And these are elements that people have to look at. Finding out the weakest link, finding out the bottleneck will help you to improve project and process performance. Now let's have some examples of constraints. We can find them in all businesses. Like I told you, in a steel factory, when we are writing production code lines of code, it's very nice to have a large number of lines of code written. But the thing is it important how many lines of code did you write or how many finished programs did you realize in the time? Now, when you will look at typical operations, the constraints will limit the delivery of the orders. Even when production is going well, we are producing, but like I said, the goal is not to produce. It's the goal to sell the products that have been produced, and we have to sell them to the customers. Now, it depends on the demand, depends on the orders that we are making. And I've seen it many times. People are producing, every machine is producing well, and it's considered as a good element. But what they don't see, and we will look at it in the following slides, what the possibilities are. The other element, when we look at projects, here we look at the main constraint, which is the critical path, because it's limiting the throughput of the work. And when we have delays on the critical path, we are late, we must facilitate the throughput and avoid work in progress. Work in progress means activities that have been completed, but that are not usable yet. Now, when we look at the theory of constraints by Goldratt, he looks at the constraints and he says, okay, first of all, what are the elements that we have to do? The first thing is to identify the system's constraints. What are the constraints? They can be physical limitations or an erroneous policy. We have to decide how to exploit the system. We must find ways to strengthen the weakest link. We can do that in different ways. There are different solutions. We have to subordinate everything to the above decision. So we concentrate on the constraint only and not on the other elements. And we have to elevate the system's constraints. So we have to find additional possibilities to enhance the throughput of the constraints by hiring more people, adding more elements, more production capacity, and other ways, finding ways how to elevate, how to increase the throughput of the constraint. When we look at a bottleneck, and we're going to look at the bottleneck in production, we have a chain of activities. We have an initial step. Here we suppose that we have unlimited supply, so they're coming from the raw materials, and we produce 1000 units per time, per hour, or whatever. So the next step is a step where we have 5000 as a capacity. It means the step can do, in the most optimistic case, 5000 units per time unit, and there are 1000 units coming in. They go straight to the process, so there is no work in progress waiting for the second step. The third step is very special. Here we only have 300 units per time unit. So we receive 1000 units from the previous step. We use only 300 of them. So per time unit, we have a work in progress here of 700 items. Second time unit, 1400. So it's constantly growing. And the last step, we have again 1000 as a capacity. So they receive 300 items per time unit. They go through, and the 300 time units, 300 units basically are coming out of the process. So the total output is 300 units. Basically what's happening, the input, we have raw materials coming in for 1000 items, and only 300 items are completed per cycle. So this is not really cost effective, and all the money is stored in front of step 3, which is the bottleneck. We have a high work in progress, we can have quality issues, losses, and we are not able to supply the customers as requested. So we have to find out what can we do with the bottleneck step. So that's it about the theory of constraints as defined by Goldratt. We defined what a constraint is, and we looked at a bottleneck example in production, but it's similar to what we do in project management. It's only a little bit easier to explain. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next videos. Thank you, and bye-bye.